Sorry, that's okay. That's okay. So it starts off with a trickle, few birds in late February, and builds in the following weeks until what we get is what I like to call a tidal wave in May. It's and the nice thing about it, I remember when I was working on the magazine, I felt the crush of the not the crush, the pressure of just this relentless, repetitive schedule. Like I was always several months ahead, planning one issue, and while I was finishing another, and that feels kind of like you're just being your life is being dictated by this 8-week schedule. And even now, when I'm not doing that anymore, I still think that life is fairly chaotic for many, many reasons. But the spring migration proceeds in kind of a predictable, and for me, a very reassuring kind of pattern. And it's one of the great joys and solaces that I take from, those walks in Estabrook Park, where I can observe that there's a larger, longer calendar at work, and that we don't need to be, we can take some solace in that, or I do. Typically starts in late February, early March, with the arrival of the red-winged blackbirds, and right on schedule. That's where I heard them and saw them this year. Shortly after that, and red-winged blackbirds frequently are accompanied by common grackles and Canada geese. They're followed in mid-March, predictably, by sandhill cranes and killdeer. I have a bearded collie named Bowie, and it was still cold and not very nice outside when I was walking in Shorewood, not far from Estabrook Park. And we had to stop and we had to run back, and he loved that part, you can imagine, because up ahead, above me, was a flock of sandhill cranes bugling up above. It was I don't always get to hear that each spring, but I did this year. Now I loved it. This is mid-March. Waterfowl also make their returns in mid-March. Early April brings tree swallows and yellow-rumped warblers. Tree swallows nest winter farther north than any other North American swallow, along the Gulf Coast, in Mexico and Central America. And the yellow rumps spend the winter in the southern half of the country. So these are birds that do not have far to travel in order to get here. And when we see the tree swallows and the butterbutts, we know that the palm warblers are sure to arrive shortly too. And along with the palm warblers is always the black and white warbler. And when you see these birds, then you know that you're on the verge of the deluge opening up. And sure enough, in early May, predictably, Baltimore orioles, rose-breasted grosbeaks, great crested flycatchers, scarlet tanagers, vireos, all sorts of warblers, and other birds arrive. This is the peak and the culmination for the weeks of watching and waiting as the migration proceeded. Yeah.
This is a good time to see.
Sure. You mean like right now?
What was the question?
The question was, is now a good time to bring out seed for your? Yeah, sure. It might be early for the hummingbirds to put up your hummingbird feeders, right? But seed, any bird that would arrive would be grateful for it. And there are a number of birds that are here during the winter, and they would be grateful for the seed. Yeah. It's reassuring, right? The progression of the spring, but arriving early does carry with it some risk. This is a killdeer. I was photographed by another photographer I had the pleasure of working with at the magazine. Her name is Melissa Grew. She found a nest, a killdeer nest, in the parking lot of a church in Ithaca, New York, in 2016, in late March. And and then several days after, maybe about a week later, Ithaca was blanketed with several inches of wet, sloppy, cold snow. And Melissa returned and took this picture. That's one of the parents, because killdeer shared the incubation duties, but this is a killdeer incubating those eggs. And doing it even as the snow continues to fall. You can see the snowflakes dropping and accumulate on the back of the killdeer. It's kind of a dire picture, but Melissa wrote that it ended happily because 2 of those eggs hatched, which is kind of the equivalent of fledging for killdeer, because they pop out of the eggs ready to go, kind of all fuzzy and ready to head out and find their food. This is the female ruby-throated hummingbird, and it's another early arriver. We've already described these where it spends the winter and where it breeds. The reason I brought it back here is because I wanted to talk about the Hilton Pond Center for Piedmont Natural History in York, South Carolina. For decades, they've been operating a project called Operation Ruby Throat. Maybe some of you know that. And what Operation Ruby Throat does, it records the arrival time. So it kind of uses a citizen science approach to recording the arrival dates of ruby-throated hummingbirds in the spring. And if you gather all that data over a period of time, it allows you to produce a map similar to this, which shows the average spring migration arrival dates for ruby-throated hummingbirds. And what it shows is that ruby-throated hummingbirds arrive on the Gulf Coast typically March 1st, and then make their way north as the average nighttime temperature climbs over 35 or 37 degrees Fahrenheit, and reaches, say, the southern Wisconsin in late April, and reaches northern Wisconsin by May 1st. That's why I say it might be early for the hummingbird feeders, but it's not too long to wait yet. This is one way to look at the spring migration and when it occurs, to look at, concentrate on one species and then to watch as it progresses up across the country. Another way is to look at all the birds that fly across the country. This is what researchers from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology did in 2022. What you're looking at are the peak arrival dates for county by county across the country, as recorded by 143 weather observing radar. Same ones that make your weather reports very colorful and nifty on your phone. And it's a pretty cool map. It's deceptively simple. This map. It looks like just a map that's been colored, but in fact, it's also a month. Think of it in terms of time, not just geography, because you can see that it shows 1 month from April 21st to May 21st, and that month has been divided into 5 equal pieces of 5 days each. So down here in blue is the earliest one. That's April 21st to the 22nd. In green, April 27th to the May 2nd, and so on. So when you get up to the top, that's May 15th to the 21st. And predictably, it's, the early dates are in the south, and the later dates are farther north. But there's a couple of really cool things about it. Number one is right here, and that's it's pointing to those peak migration dates in blue in the East Gulf, and then compare them to the peak migration dates in the West Gulf and in neighboring Texas. Well, you can see that area in the East Gulf, the peak migration happens earlier than even in Florida and in Texas. And the same thing happens over here in the Central Valley of California. In the Central Valley, you've got a large blue area where peak migration is several days ahead of the counties to the east and to the west. And the question is why? Well, why might that be? And there's a good answer for it. These are areas where with a lot of overwintering birds. So these are birds that spent the winter in these locations. Central Valley has a tremendous number of overwintering birds. And these birds, in essence, got a head start. The other thing that I think you should all pay attention to here.
I didn't understand what. So the birds were already there, so
Yeah.
they're just leaving them. Is that
betcha.
it?
That's exactly right.
Oh.
Yeah, they're up in the air and heading north. That's exactly right. The other thing that is really interesting to pay attention to is in these three circles here, because in each one you can see counties where the peak migration dates are ahead of the peak migration dates to the east and to the west of them. In Texas, there's kind of a green bulge that has yellow to the left and right. Up in, I guess that's Nebraska, you can see that there's a bulge that pushes up into the orange. And then in the Dakotas, well, there is no red up in those western Dakotas. And, I think that for years I had this concept in my mind, probably from ornithology books or just from people talking on the birding trail that, well, these birds, they all fly up from Central America and South America, and they follow the coast, the Gulf Coast, and they swoop up through Texas, and then they take this highway, that sort of ushers them north into their breeding grounds in Canada. And I thought, I can see it. This is in essence a temporal representation of that highway that's ushering all these birds from the south up to the north. So when do they fly? And by that, I mean, when during the day do they fly? This interests me because, when you consider the extraordinary diversity of birds, big ones, small ones, raptors, ducks, everything. It's amazing that they can be just divided into two large groups. There's the birds that fly during the day and the birds that fly at night. The birds that fly at night, of course, are nocturnal migrants, and the ones that fly during the day are your diurnal migrants. Diurnal migrants include many familiar birds. I've got 4 of them here because they're just so recognizable. Blue jay, a member of Latin American robin, yellow-bellied sapsucker, and the blackbird again. But diurnal migrants also include all of the aerial insectivores. Aerial insectivores include swallows, swifts, and this is the common nighthawk. As you can see, it makes another long-distance migration. Its breeding range extends up into northern Canada, but its non-breeding ranges are in northwestern South America and even farther south in South America. And it makes that migration each year exclusively in the day, as do all the other aerial insectivores. And the reason is because they feed on aerial insects while they fly. And those insects are available to them only during the day. So that's when they fly.
Explain what diurnal means.
You mean, well, it means no. You mean I would have to like that etymology?
Yeah.
Day active?
Yes. Daytime active.
Yeah. Sorry.
Not really light.
Sure. Yeah, but maybe I misunderstood your question. Yeah.
No. They usually migrate during the day.
Absolutely. Yes, that's yes, that's absolutely what it means. Right. Diurnal migrants also include a category of birds that includes vultures, storks, pelicans, a large number of hawks, including broad-winged hawks, Mississippi kites, and cranes, including whooping cranes and also sandhill cranes. That's what you see here. These are sandhill cranes. And their inset here is their breeding and breeding ranges. You can see that they sandhill cranes that winter down here in Texas or along the Gulf Coast or in Florida. These birds make potentially a mammoth migration all the way to northern Canada or to Alaska or across the Bering Strait into eastern Russia. And they do that the way these other birds do, by taking advantage of thermals. Thermals are rising columns of warm air. And those thermals are created by sunshine that strikes the surface of the earth and warms the surface. But it warms the surface of the earth differently. One spot will get warmer faster than another one will. And the spots that warm up will heat the air immediately above them. And that warm air, of course, as we all know from our physics classes, wants to rise, creating an elevator that hawks and especially cranes and other birds will seek out and then circle in, riding that elevator as high as they can until that rising current will peter out. And then they will set their wings, point themselves in the direction they want to go, and glide to their next thermal. And using this method, they can cross huge distances without flapping their wings. It's one of the most economical ways to travel. It's not always, I have to stop though for a second and say that it's not always clear cut, these distinctions between diurnal and nocturnal migrants, because Canada geese are diurnal, they migrate during the day, but snow geese migrate at night. Piping plovers are nocturnal, but shorebirds like American golden plover, white rump sandpiper, and others will complete their epic migrations day or night, regardless of whether the sun is up or not. They'll just keep flying. We do know that the majority of small birds are nocturnal. Cuckoos, flycatchers, thrushes, warblers, buntings, orioles, including Baltimore oriole. We're not entirely sure why birds fly at night, but we have some good ideas or some good theories. One of them is that temperatures at night are typically lower than during the daytime. And when you are relying on powered flight, you're flapping your wings nonstop as you fly through the air. You're generating a lot of heat. So flying through cooler air helps you dissipate that increased body temperature. Airs aloft during the nighttime tend to be calmer. There's less turbulence than there is during the day, so it's easier for you to make progress as you fly. There's also fewer predators aloft at night, because as we just saw, a lot of the predators, hawks, falcons, the birds that would like to make a snack of a small migrating bird, they migrate during the day. So if you can fly when your chief predators are not in the air, that's an advantage to you. And if you think about it, if you fly at night, then you've got the whole day free to eat, right? And that's I remember I read that once, and I thought, well, that seems so obvious, but yet it makes a lot of sense, right? And it makes a lot of sense if you're a bird like an oriole that needs daylight and eyeballs to find a berry to eat, or to find a halved orange on a shepherd's crook, or maybe a jar of tasty jelly, right? Chances are you're going to find those during the day, and you're not going to find them at night. And then finally, the stars are visible at night. And we know that birds use the light of the sun and the stars to orient them, to point them in the right direction as they begin their migrations, and also to help them stay on track and to navigate as they're going. This reliance on light puts them at risk though, because it also makes them reliant, or it also draws them to sources of artificial light at night. And birds are just hardwired for darkness. So these sources of light draw them, and they can't resist it. And the magnetic power of artificial light at night for a migrating bird is so strong that they will not only fly to a source of light, be it on a bridge or a building or a communications tower, or a drilling rig in the Gulf, but they will circle it endlessly. And if the weather is poor, there's a low cloud ceiling, the winds are poor, they'll be low anyway, and that circling will put them at risk of either colliding, say, with the wires that are supporting the tower or the building itself. And this is a big deal because the collisions are often fatal, and it's funny to think that for a long time this was just kind of maybe speculated upon and it wasn't proved, but we now know that it is a fact, and we know that because it was demonstrated here this is, of course, is New York City, and this is a beautiful picture of Lower Manhattan, shows the tribute in light. This is the memorial to the 9/11 and to all the people who lost their lives on 9/11. It's created by 88 lights shining directly upward, and it's gorgeous. It's moving. But seeing from a bird's perspective, it's significant, I think, that those beams can reach as high as 4 miles up. And you can see those lights from 60 miles away.
They're always on?
No, they're on from dawn until dusk on 9/11 annually. So it's just this one day. But that one day presented a real opportunity to New York City Audubon, now known as the New York City Bird Alliance, to study the effect of those lights and to compare that effect with the effect when the lights are not on. And to do this, they used weather radar. And what they discovered by doing that is that when the lights are off, they were able to count about 500 birds within a half mile of the site of the tribute. But within just 20 minutes, they counted 16,000 birds in the beams themselves, 16,000. So that's an indication of just like the power of these lights to draw the birds in, and then also this kind of magnetic power that the lights have to hold birds and to keep them there.
These are all nocturnal migrants, correct?
Yes. Yeah. This is this is very important because the number of birds killed annually in the United States in collisions with building glass was estimated in 2014 to be between 365 million and 988 million. These are staggeringly huge numbers. But even more shocking is that we have a good hunch now that these numbers, even the highest number, which is close to 1 billion birds a year, is too low. We think that because of several things, 3 reasons, in fact. The first one is that study in 2014 that originally estimated the number of birds that died in the collisions counted only birds that they found that were dead or fatally wounded. And what that means then is that they did not count any birds that collided with a structure, flew away, and then died somewhere else. And what we're learning is that far fewer collision victims die on site than we originally assumed, and certainly than far fewer than what the authors of the 2014 study assumed. It was once thought that the dead birds found at a site represented 80% of all the birds that collided at the structure. So if you did what they call a scavenger or a carcass survey, the birds that you pick up would represent 80% of all of the birds that struck the structure. But recently, and we're talking really recently, 2023, 2024, there have been further studies done, including one in Germany that used video cameras that suggest that that number is way too high. In fact, using video surveillance, the number of birds, it's now thought that the number of birds that are found represent only 7% of the total number of birds. 7. And last year, researchers from Fordham University and New York City Bird Alliance studied or attempted to study the outcomes of birds that were taken to wildlife rehabilitators. So these are birds that were picked up on site after colliding with a building, taken to a rehabilitator, and then they ask, well, what happened? And they found that the mortality of those injured birds taken to rehabilitators was 60%. So in their study, they came up with 60% of the birds taken to rehabilitators still died, either as a result of the collision itself, the injuries that they sustained, or because they were euthanized because they could not be rehabilitated. 60%. So for this reason, they suggest that the total number of birds that are killed in collisions in the United States each year is well above 1 billion birds, which is a mouthful considering that 988 million is a big number. And it's ironic, too, to think that for years when we wanted to answer this question, how high do migrants fly, we had to rely on collisions with airplanes and collisions with buildings. That was like our chief source of data. I'm sorry, do you have a question?
Or your thing with the lights, they ever look at if those birds got fatigued and died of fatigue at all just from flying around and around and around and getting trapped in the mesmerization of the lights? Yeah,
this is actually a very it's a very good story because New York City Audubon worked with the people at the World Trade Center site. And when the number of birds in the beam grows to a certain height, they turn off the lights.
I was just going to ask, can they run it like 11 minutes every hour? Or
it's kind of the way that it runs.
Release from it, essentially.
I don't know what the period, if it's on a regular schedule, but I do know they turn off the lights. They wait for the birds to disperse and then they turn back on. Yeah.
Threshold is 500 birds. And then if they detect between 500 and 1,000, they turn off the lights to 15 to 20 minutes.
Yes, thank you.
The birds to disperse, and then
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, so the tribute at night. Yeah. And again, we're talking about one day from dawn to dusk. So how high do migrants fly? How fast? We are fortunate nowadays to have better tools at our disposal, including weather radar. And we know a few things for sure. We know that the altitudes at which birds fly varies. They're very, very good at seeking and finding the altitudes at which they can, where the winds are favorable for where they want to go. Birds tend to fly higher when making long crossings over water or over mountains. And as we've already suggested, the headwinds and cloud cover make birds fly lower. Shorebirds tend to fly highest in general. They consistently fly higher than 3,000 feet. Hawks, vultures, storks, cranes, they all fly below 3,000 feet. Nocturnal migrants fly over land between 2,100 and 2,400 feet, and often lower, as we've learned from tower collisions. And sometimes they fly higher. as we've also learned. A Swainson's thrush wearing a radio transmitter was recorded flying at 6,000 feet. Although its average altitude was actually much lower, around 1,000 feet. Waterfowl tend to fly lower still, between 300 and 1,200 feet, but in the bird world, you can never really take anything as a rule, because a mallard was struck by an airplane flying over the basin and range in Nevada at 21,000 feet. In 2021, analysts from Birdcast used their weather radar data to compare altitudes of birds across the country. And what they found was that birds in the West tended to fly higher than birds in the East. Birds in the East, the average height was between 1,300 and 1,600 feet above the ground, whereas out West, the average height was 2,600 feet, and many birds flew higher than that, as suggested by the mallard. The typical height there when they flew higher was 5,000 to 6,000 feet above the ground. The differences between the West and the East has a lot to do with weather, prevailing winds. At least this is what the Birdcast researchers suggested, is that the winds and the weather systems out West are different than what typically occurs in the East. And also, if you just think about the West, the topography is very different. Like there's mountains in the West, and birds, like airplanes, have to get over it, so they fly higher.
What is the significance of the numbers you have up there? The 1 through 7, or 1 through 10? That
Oh, those are sites that the
monitoring.
yeah. I was very curious about what Birdcast would say about birds that flew over Estabrook Park and my home nearby, and indeed over Milwaukee County. So I went to the Birdcast website, which you can find, and I recommend to you all to do this. You go to birdcast.info, and I typed in Milwaukee County, and then I assembled all of the data for the fall and the spring migrations of last year. And what we found was pretty interesting. In spring, Birdcast provides data between March 1st and June 15th. That's 106 nights. And during that time, a total of 27,761,000 birds flew across Milwaukee County. That's an average of over 250,000 every single night during that period.
Has that been an increase or decrease?
I don't have enough data right now to tell you. That would be good, but we're going to get to something that'll be interesting about that in a second. They typically now Birdcast presents the altitude as a mean. So all of these numbers are kind of like the midpoint, meaning that there are birds that flew higher and birds that flew lower. But if you take all the means for those 106 nights and then you average them, you get 1,427 feet above ground. That's the average mean for all those birds that flew. Yeah.
When you hear birds flying over at night, can you hear that high, or are you just hearing the first couple hundred feet?
I think you can hear that high.
Can you repeat that question?
Can you hear birds as they're flying overhead at that height? I think it depends a lot on the weather and the wind, whether you're able to hear, but certainly you can hear birds as they fly overhead. The altitude in the fall range from like 400 feet at the low end and up to 3,400 feet. And actually, if you're curious about the 1,427 feet, and you want to have something in your to imagine that by, if you stand at the foot of the Empire State Building and look up to the top of the dirigible mast at the very top, that's just over 1,450 feet. So the mean here is about these birds were flying over Milwaukee County at about Empire State height above. Speed, an average of 22.7 miles per hour. There were nights recorded when they flew only 3 miles per hour, and other nights when they flew as fast as 60 miles per hour. That's the portrait of last spring. I wanted, and I think what's really cool is to compare that to last fall. The fall migration on Birdcast is from August 1st to November 15th. And if you do the same sort of like spreadsheeting that I did with all of the data from that, what you end up with is some results like this. The speed in the fall was comparable, maybe just a few ticks faster, 23 miles per hour on average, that a little bit faster than in spring. The birds in fall also flew a little bit higher, about 600 feet on average, higher than in the springtime. The range, though, is always interesting to me, too. The low of 500 and a high of 5,900. I think that those differences in altitude and speed can be largely explained by weather. And I think that if we were to put successive years together, we would probably see them come back together. The number that really I want to call your attention to, though, is the total number of birds. Because on 106 nights in the fall, 48,388,000 birds crossed Milwaukee County. And we already know that in the springtime, only just about 28 million birds crossed. So this really makes you want to ask, well, why is that number in fall so much larger than the number in the springtime? And of course, this is the numbers are inflated by all of the recently hatched birds that are making their first migrations, right? So this is it's something that you knew happened, but it's great to see it, isn't it, in numbers? But of course, a number like this can be, or a question like this can be asked a different way, right? And you can ask it like this. You can say, well, if 48 million birds fly south, why do only 28 million come back? That's a sobering question. But I think what it reflects is the challenges faced by all migrating birds, right? Just as every egg laid doesn't produce a fledgling, not every fledgling makes it all the way to the wintering grounds. And of those birds that make it to the wintering grounds, not all of them make it back to the breeding grounds. I guess I knew that because I had read it. You know, this is something, in fact, I had read in an ornithology textbook a long time ago that more than half of small land birds never return from their southbound migrations. More than half don't make it back. But I have to say, I was surprised to look at this number to see it reflecting that truth, that reality that happens every year. And this is, there's plenty to think about with this sort of a thing, because what you get an image of in your head is that not only do the young not make it back, but many of the adults don't make it back as well. But enough of them do, right, that a population can be sustained, right? Enough of them make it back to the breeding grounds, and enough of them fledge enough chicks, and enough of those chicks then subsequently make the migrations, and the system continues, right? So that any disturbance in that system is what really we have to be concerned about, whether it's neonicotinoids, whether it's buildings, whether it's cats, whether it's whatever it is. Any kind of an added disturbance might throw this very precisely balanced system out of whack. And that's when I think about, one of the things I think about when I see a number like that. So what can we do to help these birds? I think anyone who has read the or heard about the journal Science, the science, the article that was in the journal Science in 2019 about 3 billion birds gone, knows that birds of North America are in crisis. We've lost 2.9 billion breeding adult birds since 1970. So in my lifetime, certainly. And that means that we should all be looking for, eager to do things that would help birds in any way that we can. And I can think of 5 right off the top of my head. The first one is to buy a duck stamp. This is it's mandatory if you're a hunter. It's allowed. It allows entry into national wildlife refuges. But it's great for all wildlife observers, including bird watchers, for a cost of $25, $29 if you buy an e-stamp. 98% of that sum of money goes directly to acquire and protect wetland habitat and to purchase easements for national wildlife refuges. So it's a great way to contribute to the protection and creation of habitat that all sorts of birds use. Second thing is that we should keep our cats indoors. We know from a 2015 study that predation by cats is the #1 source of human-caused mortality. Cats kill about 2.4 billion birds every year in the United States. That's way more, probably way more than even that new total that we have for collisions with buildings. And there are many excellent ways that you can keep your cat entertained indoors and comfortable and happy.
Wait, did I understand right? Now you just told us 1 billion birds died from collisions and even more died from cats.
Yes. Yes.
And you said that's in the United States.
In the United States. Yes.
Oh, and when you go to other countries and you see sometimes cats all over, you're like, oh my God.
Yes. Yeah, it's yes.
You know what you can do? We constantly on our trail camp see cats in the yard at night. What can you do?
What you feel is necessary.
Where I used to live. There's a white cat, and I always wanted to go to the baseball.
If you're in a bell, that's your
Yeah.
It might, but it probably won't. I don't know what I could recommend that you do. I know that if a cat were in my yard and it were not my yard, I would be legally entitled to trap it, right? But if you're talking about it,
What are you gonna do with that? Take it to Matt.
take it to MADEC or
Okay.
yeah.
Take it to where?
MADEC, the Milwaukee Area Domestic Animal Control.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I don't know though if are you talking about like a trail cam in a public place or?
It's in our yard.
Oh, it's in your property. Yeah, my understanding is that depending upon where you live, most communities have rules that say that pets may not be wandering other people's property unattended.
Yeah.
So that like I can't let my dog just go and poop in your yard, and I can't let my cat run over there either.
Right.
Right? I mean that's that's your property.
Right.
I hesitate to do that because it won't make it popular with your neighbors, you know. But on the other hand, you know, it is your property, and I think that you're in the right in that situation. I think also we should all take steps to make sure that the windows in our homes and in our meeting places in our businesses are protected from bird collisions. This is another talk that I have given in the past. So if you can imagine the amount of time that I've spent talking today, I spent that much time talking about birds, so about collisions. But suffice it to say that there are products on the market today that are easy to obtain. They don't cost a huge amount, and they're easy to apply to windows. and that they are almost nearly 100% effective at preventing collisions. This is a house of someone who lives even closer to Estabrook Park than I do, my friend Gina. She used feather-friendly dots. I hope that you can see that on there to put them on the outside. So she created a grid of dots on the exterior surface of that window. It does not, it doesn't prevent her from looking out the window and waving when I walk by, right? But what it does do is it does two things. Those dots communicate to a bird that transparency that might suggest to a bird is a passageway that it can fly through. Well, maybe it's not a passageway. And this picture is good because it shows trees and other things reflected in the window. And so it's easy to imagine that a bird looking at those bushes or those branches reflected in that glass might think, oh, I'm going to fly over there. But now if there's those dots on the window interrupt that reflection and make it better. So what I have here is a handout. I printed out 20, not assuming that there would be so many people here today. But what it does is it's got links to a number of general articles about steps you can take to prevent bird window collisions. And also links and very brief descriptions of 6 products that are excellent at preventing collisions. So I'll hand these out later, or you can pick them up on your way out. The fourth step that I hope everyone takes is to report what you see. Reason for that is that each entry that you make into eBird contributes to a database of knowledge about bird presence and numbers and absence and timing that, taken together with the observations of all of your fellow bird watchers, allows conservationists and policymakers to make informed decisions about resources that they'll use to acquire more habitat, take steps to conserve birds. All the steps that we need to take have to be based on data, and that data largely is coming from bird watchers like you and I. Each time that we add something into eBird, it's vitally important. We might think we're just building our life list, but in fact, what we're doing is we're really we're paving the way to make some really smart decisions about conserving birds. And that's a really good way to think about eBird. And then I wish I didn't have to talk about this fifth step that we can take, but I know I have to. And that is to stand guard for bird flu. The H5N1 virus strain emerged in Asia in 2003. 2005, it had spread to Africa, Middle East, and Europe. In 2021, it was in Canada and the United States. And I read an article just this past weekend that scientists in November of last year and January of this year found the virus in mammals and birds on the Antarctic Peninsula. So it is everywhere. And it's affecting all sorts of birds: hawks, eagles, falcons, owls, crows.
Has there been any discussion about any kind of progress regarding vaccines regarding H1N1 or bird flu?
There has been, but it's the difficulty of administering a vaccine to highly mobile birds, right? And also the speed with which it is affecting, especially poultry. Chickens and turkey they're dying so fast that there's hardly any opportunity to inoculate a bird to do any good. The interesting thing is that even though the virus affects many different types of birds, the bird's susceptibility varies. It's of real high risk to waterfowl, seabirds, shorebirds, and raptors. The waterfowl typically carry and transmit the virus, but they don't always get sick. Sometimes they do. Whereas like the raptors, the hawks, and others, When they get it, they frequently die. You know, I chose snow geese here because 5,000 snow geese died of bird flu in eastern Pennsylvania in January. 1,500 or more sandhill cranes died in south central Indiana in late February. And for the first time since the 1960s or the 1970s, numbers of peregrine falcons in the United States are declining. They don't know for sure that bird flu is the cause, but they suspect it strongly that that is the reason why. One of the peregrine falcon researchers who is quoted in an article that I read called peregrine falcons the perfect go look for sick birds machine. So think of that, how they hunt. You know, they'll find the sick one and take it. And unfortunately, especially on the coast, in New Jersey and in Washington, where populations have really started to go down, the birds there are eating waterfowl and probably infected waterfowl, ducks, right? Of course, the risk to poultry is extremely high. It's almost like you know, it should be in all caps and underlined. The virus kills every member of affected flocks. The mortality is usually 100%. And as of March 13th, that's just last week, the Centers for Disease Control had counted 166,417,000 affected poultry. That's chickens primarily, but also turkeys that died quickly after becoming infected or were culled. So those are affected birds. The advice now, though, is that the risk is relatively lower for an outbreak in wild songbirds. Wild songbirds are less likely than waterfowl to contract the variants, and they are less likely to shed large amounts of the virus. And of course, wild songbirds are the birds that visit our bird feeders primarily. So consequently, and as of this day, there is no recommendation that you need to take down your bird feeder. At least not yet. If the virus mutates in a way that makes it more lethal to songbirds, that would be another story. And of course, there's an important caveat to this, or proviso, and that is that if you keep domestic poultry, the recommendation is that you take down your feeders. There is the small chance that one wild songbird might, you know, eat from the poultry food or poop in its water or in some other way transmit the virus to the flocks, the poultry flocks. And the poultry are obviously, as I've said, are extremely susceptible to it. So the recommendation is to keep poultry food and the poultry water away from wild songbirds, and to separate poultry from wild birds, or even to keep the poultry indoors. The International Crane Foundation, Southern Wisconsin Bird Alliance, and the Wisconsin Society for Ornithology have published a form online that you can reach at. You can find it at this URL, bit.ly/wisbirdflu. That's bit.ly/wisbirdflu, where you can report sick and dead birds. The Department of Natural Resources, you can also report 5 or more sick or dead birds to the Department of Natural Resources via their wildlife switchboard. And you can reach them by email at dnrwildlifeswitchboard@wisconsin.gov, or you can leave a message by phone at 608-267-0866. Yes. Hi.
Do you think that climate change makes things like this virus stronger? You know, and is it muscles and?
Well, we've had a great amount of winter this year.
Just here. Right, they got bird flu all over the country. All over we just sent an article, right? So that's the whole world.
Yeah, it's everywhere. The effects of climate change are being seen in all different areas. One of the interesting things about watching for those tree swallows, on that pyramid of arrivals, the early arrivals, is that tree swallows have been advancing their arrival dates by like 5 days. They're much earlier than they used to be, and that's been proven. It's hard to imagine that it's not, although I can't describe the effect for you. I just don't know right now. Yeah. Yes.
So I've heard advice lately that if you live near waterfowl, like a lake or right by a river, that you should take down your bird feeders because of the proximity of the waterfowl. And here at We're a Nature Center, we have the lake right out here with ducks and geese and everything, and then we have a lot of wild turkeys here that stay near the building and feed at the feeders. Do you think those our feeders should come down at this point? Or soon?
I honestly, I think that's beyond my knowledge. It's good advice on that.
Being discussed, or
Yeah,
some people are wondering.
right, and I can see why. Have you identified any, obviously sick-looking or dead birds? Yeah. That would be something, to watch for. Yes.
What if there's a lot of birds usually use like lake streams and tributaries for migratory patterns. And if there are certain, for instance, I'll just use Horton Marsh, for example. The Horton Marsh has a program to help filter out a lot of the possibly bird food. It could reduce a lot of
Where they're
like
lowering,
waterborne toxins. Right?
they're lowering the water levels, is that it?
Well, just filtering parts of the marsh. Oh, we're draining, yeah. I just think that if by filtering portions of some of the water within the lakes and streams and so on, that might actually help make it a lot cleaner for many of the migratory birds to go through.
It makes sense.
I mean, it just seems logical.
But it's hard to know exactly how effective that would be. Because I think what we know for sure is that the virus is spread by not only by the droppings, but also by mucus and like eye secretions and things like that. So it's hard for me to imagine like an N95 type filtration system that would achieve the kind of effectiveness that I'm guessing would be required for something like that. There might be other toxins or pollutants that would be caught in a filtering system. But if you think about just like what we all went through when, in the peak of the COVID pandemic, we learned a lot about viruses and about the type of coverings that we needed to prevent infection by a respiratory virus. I think that it would be similar to what you would need to combat a waterborne. Yeah.
I was wondering about aircraft. What effect does aircraft have on the migration? I mean, because the geese and the ducks, do they fly into? I've heard they fly into the plane. I don't know what it's called.
Yeah, bird strikes are a problem and a serious problem. There's a very cool program at airports across the country to capture and relocate snowy owl from the airport because of the risk that is posed to the airplane, or the risk that those planes pose to the bird. they like the wide open spaces. You'll see all sorts of other attempts of airplanes, airports to use dogs, they use noisemakers, some have used falcons to scare up the birds and to get them from roosting nearby airports. There's a lot of irony in that for us because frequently we choose to locate our airports on kind of the outskirts of a city and frequently along the water's edge where there's a lot of reeds and places where birds gather. And then we think, oh, darn it, there's only birds here. That happens a lot. I don't know if that answered your question, but it is a big concern. And I don't mean to make light of it at all because when a bird strikes a plane, it's serious. It can be very serious. People can lose their lives and planes can crash. It's not good. So we definitely want to take steps to make that happen. And that's, yes.
You mentioned birdcasts, and they have an alert that you can get. That's like, tonight's a really big night for migration. So turn off your lights and close your blinds. Turn off your outside lights in your driveway, on your porch, and everything. Do you think that helps?
I do. I do. One of the items that's on this handout here is a link to an article about Lights Out, the Lights Out program, and it is something that works. If you can give people a heads up, just like this happens with the wind turbines also. That if you can give the operators of wind turbines the heads up that it's a heavy migration night, they can switch off the turbines in time for that to happen. And I know that that in the North Sea there are turbines standing there that are operating with radar systems, and when the radars pick up approaching birds, they switch off the turbines. And in this way, if we can get enough businesses to actually pay attention to those alerts and then actually switch off their lights, I think it's very valuable, and I'm all in favor of anything that gets people to be thinking about birds and to think that they have a role to play in making sure that they get to their destination safely. So I like it very much, that idea. Yeah.
I also have been very concerned about lights at night because it's just getting brighter and brighter. And I shouldn't feel like it's high noon when I'm driving my car at night. It's blinding for me. And I think the LEDs are getting brighter and brighter and brighter.
Yeah.
And I wonder, to have these bird city designations, maybe that's something that should go in the equation. By the way, people, can we have because all these lights, one after the other, they could get rid of half of them and safety would not be affected for the drivers and the pedestrians.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. When I was with the magazine, I had the opportunity to go on a bird watching trip in Uganda and East Africa. And we drove out to one of these camps. And I'm sure everybody here who's been to East Africa will have the same experience. And that is where you feel the darkness, right? You're in it. And I thought, wow, look at me, I'm a grown man, been on this earth for decades, and I have, this is the very first time that I've experienced darkness, really darkness, where you really wish for your headlamp to part that darkness for you. It's actually kind of a physical presence. And and I think that you can have that experience now, what you're talking about when you go to southeastern Arizona. It's a birding Arizona, a great place to go. It's fun to be there, but yet you drive out and you look for a dark spot. Years ago, you could get into the desert and find dark. And now it's hard. It's harder to do. But in terms of bird city and requirements for bird friendliness, one thing that is worth considering is a dark sky certification for a community. They do certify communities as opposed to just destinations. And if I wouldn't be able to lay out all of the requirements, but if you show a commitment to educate your citizens about lights, kind of what we're talking about, and if you as a community, choose lights that do not project upwards, and that the lights shine at a certain color temperature of Kelvin that's not full of blue light, but it's more of like that yellowish kind of light. It's much better for moths and insects and as well as birds. But you can actually get yourself listed as a dark sky community. And this is really great for, I think there's all kinds of studies about the effect on sleep in humans and stress levels really it is better for the insect population because you're not really messing up that kind of like same sort of homing instinct they have with bright lights. And it's fabulous with birds because if you can, so that's one way to do it. And that's kind of top of mind for me because recently I live in Shorewood on the just north side of Milwaukee, and I have been a member of the conservation committee for a long time, and I get talking about things like this, and as a result, that community has going to have some shielded lights in it very soon, which is pretty good. So I mean, you can do it. You go to your meetings. It's happened. Yeah.
To your question, if you do pursue that, partner with astronomy clubs.
Exactly. There's so many groups
Astronomy
that
clubs are
really.
actively trying to get towards.
There's a Milwaukee astronomy club actually having observatory growing.
Yeah.
I think have an open house
It's a great idea.
sometime fairly soon. I think in May. People may get a contact.
Yeah, it's a good idea. It's a great idea.
This lady had a thought too about businesses.
But there's so many businesses that are leaving their lights on overnight, for their storefronts, and there's no need for it.
There's no need for it.
They're
Yeah.
not even open. There needs to be ordinance.
Right.
This industrial parks still have a lot of it. It's not even when they're near it's already areas.
Yeah. It's
I mean, I understand the reason why it's probably for security purposes of safety.
yeah.
I mean, now everybody has cameras in this.
Yeah, what is it? It's the US Building Council. They're the ones who make the LEED certification for buildings. They've for years they had a what they call the pilot credit for bird friendly construction. And now that actually they've adopted the pilot credit, so now it's actually a real credit, a bird friendly credit. So if you're going to get, you can be certified as a bird friendly building like Pfizer Forum. And part of that is about turning off your lights at night, and especially during the migratory periods, and also using lights that shine downward and not up or just generally outward. So, I mean, that I thought was hopeful because it represented kind of like
Awareness.
an increase in understanding of like the effect of these buildings. It's a funny thing, when a long time ago, even before 10 Light Books, I worked at the American Institute of Architects, and one of the things that I was impressed with was all of these architects that. Their mindset was that if you give them a program, if you give them a problem, I have a lot that this is this big, my budget is this much, I need to house this many people, and the building needs to do these things. They just kind of take that all into concern. And I think that their genius in general is that they produce things that solve, they check all those boxes. And the frustration for me is that make it bird friendly isn't on that list. And I think that that's kind of why I was encouraged by the bird friendly credit, and why I think that it's really super important that we just, open people's eyes to this sort of, to the dangers that buildings pose and the lighting poses, and, to remind people that we're sharing this planet with a lot of birds.
Are you or is anyone tracking the efforts in Wauwatosa to have a development building ordinance? We just went through either committee or the council last week.
Bird friendly?
And it did not.
Did not.
I think it was tabled. And Brian, this is
Lens. Yes.
He sent an email out, so I have a small chain. I haven't gotten a lot of information, but I think it failed by one vote. And I think it was sent to committee or put on file.
Oh, I wonder why. Yeah, that's interesting.
The development agency was against it,
Yes,
and some of the development associations came and testified against it.
sure.
And
Yeah, yeah. Well, I guess I could have predicted that one. Yeah.
it seems like it was close, which is good.
Yeah, and if not this year, then maybe later. It's
The irony was I saw something online, some of the development associations said, well, if that was in Tosa, but maybe the development department will be an outlier. So if other places did it, maybe it'd be okay. So I'm thinking, well, maybe other places should be
well,
pressured too. But
in addition to the lighting issues, one of the things that I'm proud of at Shorewood is that they adopted bird friendly building guidelines there. And they did it in Madison also,
Madison's the
Evanston, Illinois. But you can find
I know
lots of
short hasn't.
yeah,
I did not.
yeah. It can be done. And I think that my picture of things like this is that it requires not just people showing up at these meetings, but it requires kind of like also an architect who would say, "Oh, yeah, we can do that. It can be done." And there's more and more of them out there. So I think that it's
Like you said, if you give them the problem, come up with something.
sure, and this is the thing that kills me all the time. I'm sorry for taking your time, but I mean, think of a new building anywhere, and think of the thousands of decisions that had to be made to make that building. You had to make decisions on how to heat it, what kind of toilets and urinals to put in it, what to clad your floors with, whether you have carpeting or curtains, how you light it, what type of furniture you put in it, whether you want to hang all kinds of Matisses and Picassos up on the executive center. Think of it. I mean, this is true. And then they say, oh, well, we can't do that bird stuff because it's too expensive. So they might take one out of a line of 1,000 decisions and say that one, forget it. That's one we're gonna excel.
And that also allows them to say, well, we were tough on holding costs down.
Exactly, which, and I understand that too, but it's a point that we try to make all the time is that it's much more expensive to retrofit a building that kills birds than it is to design initially not to kill birds. So we're trying.
I want to be now.